Hello, you're listening to the OMG MotoGP podcast with former Grand Prix rider and British champion Keith Huewen and our very own Renita Vermuelen. It's a full house today. And of course, Jorge Martín is your 2024 MotoGP World Champion, the first independent team rider to win Valentino Rossi in the Premier class. It must have been 2001. And by just 10 points in the end. So Keith, to kick us off, what did you think of the weekend as it unfolded?
That was boring. There is no doubt about it. The racing was terribly boring, but I mean, nothing less than what we might have expected, because there were only two guys really that we were really counting on, and that was Bagnaia, who did exactly what he should do. Again, there were lots of talk about whether Bagnaia should have backed him up and into Jorge Martín, but if he had, he wouldn't have won the race probably. Unfortunately, the sprint race was mired by a bit of the inevitable tangle in the first two corners of Catalunya, which put out really the spoilers a little bit. Like Marc Marquez got put back, and so the spoilers that we were expecting to get involved didn't really get involved in the sprint as much as we might have expected. And similar on Sunday. I mean, it was a great start. I think that Jorge Martín being back on the second row meant he got a great start, but it still wasn't quite good enough to make that leap and try and get away in those early laps. And then he settled for the third place, which was absolutely adequate for what he did. I think the race, if anything, summed up Jorge Martín. He's a deserved world champion. He's done a brilliant job this year. He has changed as a racer. Maybe not as a man, but the man side of it we don't see enough of, perhaps. But from a racing perspective, he has become the real deal in this year. He's quite open, he's quite eloquent. He talks about how it got to him last year and his mental state last year and how he's overcome all of that. He was tense on Friday. You could see that in practice. He definitely had a bit of tension about him on Friday. But who the bloody hell wouldn't? The thing that you fought for your entire life, from when you were born to do, he's just achieved. And anybody that's a motorcycle racer that's achieved anything, or any sportsman, we can broaden that out to wherever you want to go. It means everything, not a little. It's not important. It is everything. It means more than you could ever imagine. I wonder whether fans and people around the paddock that are obviously watching it from as sort of punters, if you like, can understand the kind of dedication, the kind of work that's put into it from a physical point of view, but mostly it's the mental aspect of it that's really, really difficult. The highs and lows of for a sportsman are massively difficult. And in motor racing, because it's obviously physical, but it's also about mechanical, it's also about strategy. You've got other elements that can completely mire the end product, the end goal, and to get it. I mean, I felt so good. Paolo Campinotti, the owner of the Pramac team, sorry, I'm smiling to myself because Pramac, most people don't even know what Pramac do. They make generators. It's quite funny how you forget, even the main sponsor, we used to mention it all the time. But I remember when I wanted a generator once and I looked it up on the old net and I thought, Pramac, oh, there you go, I know them. I didn't buy one off them, but anyway. So it's kind of that team. 23 years in the paddock, Campinotti. It's been a long time coming. I feel proud of Ducati. I mean, they didn't get a red bike to win the championship. It came as close as they did. We'll probably talk about the inconsistencies of Bagnaia in a minute, but the fact of the matter is they didn't do what everyone was kind of alluding to, that they might mire Jorge Martin's progress in some way by not either passing on data or assisting in the correct manner. They didn't mire him. He had the proper bike. He had the full-on 24 Ducati, the same as Bagnaia, and it was competitive right the way through. So they gave him the bike and they didn't detract from that at all. Ducati have still won the World Championship, whichever way you look at it, but the number one plate goes to another team for next year.
Renita, what did you think of the weekend? I personally quite enjoyed the sprint. I thought Enea did a real good kind of role in, it didn't make a huge amount of difference for him. He doesn't really need to play the teammate role, but I think he did well.
I agree with you, I think, and I agree with Keith. It wasn't the most exciting, But thinking about how this whole season's been, we kind of knew what to expect going into this weekend. We knew this is one of the tracks Alicia's going to be stronger at that he has been in the past. We knew that Anaya and Mark were going to fight for third in the championship. We knew that Jorge was going to come into this weekend strong because of what we'd seen in the flyaway races. But like he said, with his nerves, we could clearly see that. Saturday sprint, I was on the edge of my seat when Anaya was making those moves on Jorge Martín. It was exciting and, they were reasonably clean, but I'm just sitting there going, oh my God, what is going to happen here? So it was good, but I think what amazed me the most this weekend was really seeing Jorge Martín's mental strength come into play. In his post-race press conference or debrief on Sunday evening, he said that during the Grand Prix, that he specifically didn't look at his pit board. He just wanted to focus on what he was doing. And then he looked at his pit board and saw 7 laps to go. And he's like, oh my God, this is the longest 7 laps of my life. Then he said his mind started to wonder, being like, well, I've got this now. And he started to think back to when his mum would make him pass her going to the go-kart track when he was younger and all the people who'd helped him along the way. And he's had to say to himself, no, this is not over yet. Like, let's focus, let's do this. And hearing that, then seeing how the whole weekend played out, you're like, this is that new Martín that we've been talking about all year. This is Martín 2.0, or should we just say the Martinator?
What did you guys think of the celebrations?
Oh, for God's
Keith?
sake. I mean, it was, yeah, I mean, it probably seemed like a good idea when you do it on the, in the rehearsal somewhere in a field when when it was taking all that time I wonder what he was going to come out dressed up, and he came out with that wonderfully, understated headgear, I have to say, and it took forever for the smoke was coming out. I thought, what's going to happen here? But what could possibly come out of this cube? And he kind of wandered out almost meekly. The only good bit was when he shot the other cube and it all exploded. It looked good in slow-mo. I think you said that earlier, Amy. I mean, but as a it was okay. A bit of drama, I suppose, to celebrate. But you got to do something, I suppose. But if they'd set fire to the old bike, that would have been great because he's going to Aprilia. If he got his boys to set fire to a factory Ducati in the middle of the, perfect, blew it up, that would have been a bit more like it. But no.
he changed leather suits though, because I noticed that when he was in Parc Ferme that it had all the black and white on it. But we have a group chat and Keith was saying, oh God, he's taking a while to come out. I wanted to write in that group chat, could you imagine if Arnie walks out now as the Terminator?
Well, that
would have been so good.
That would have been the coolest thing, wouldn't it? I mean, I think the build-up was something that unfortunately was slightly deflated. Yeah, he put another suit on. Have you ever tried? Well, yeah, you have, both of you. You try getting out of a sweaty, sticky suit. They are the worst, especially if you want to get out in a hurry. At the end of a race, they're all stuck to you. You're sweating a bucket load in there. Sorry, everybody, if you're having breakfast, tea, or dinner. It's one of them situations where you've got to peel it off and and then you've got to pull another suit on over your sweaty body because you've got kind of heat soak situation where it doesn't matter how much cool air, and there wouldn't have been much cool air in that cube. I mean, he's breathing all that dry ice and stuff as well, which also makes your eyes run and God knows what. They're running the dry ice. So they're filling it full of dry ice as this bloke's trying to get in and out of his leathers, out and into his leathers. And they stick to you. You can't get them on. You can't pull them. And then you've got to put your boots on. Oh my good Lord. No wonder it took as long as it did. And if they'd had Arnie walk out, that would have been perfect. Like Arnie wanders out. Hasta la vista, baby.
I thought the helmet was actually pretty stunning, though. I did like the helmet.
Well, I think the great thing about it is we all took something away from it, didn't we? I mean, the fact of the matter is, the solidarity for Valencia, the whole event actually was a superb event from the point of view that, we went past our 3 millionth trackside attendee as well for that one. I think they had what did they have? 165,000. I wrote it down somewhere. 134,000 fans over the weekend, which took us beyond the 3 millionth actual trackside attendee for the first time ever. It's a new record for attendance in a year of MotoGP. And a lot of it, of course, we had the build-up was quite cool as well. I mean, classy actually, very classy. I thought down on the grid, different anthems and so on and so forth with a violin and a piano. Must be my old age or something. I mean, it seemed quite good to me, I must say. Although I still prefer fast jets. Why don't we have helicopters and people jumping out of helicopters and fast jets anymore? What's happened to them? I enjoy that. I think
What, the big, massive, like, noisy, like, so you're like totally unassuming and just stood there, and then all of a sudden you hear this.
Yeah.
And you literally, on like 2 occasions, I think I've actually jumped down to the ground and been like, oh my God. In Austria, the Red Bull Ring, I don't know whether it's because of like the fact that you're in the hillsides, whatever, but that actually, like, it hurts your eardrums.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, mobile meetings. And you imagine what it's like for them. Imagine what it's like for them guys that are flying them bloody things. I mean, to start with, it's a turn on anyway, isn't it? I mean, like, honestly, I can't say it
It's
because
all right, but every time I have a glass of wine now, I get tinnitus. My hearing has been wrecked.
Why am I
From
laughing
the
at that? I
plane.
shouldn't be laughing. I'm just, I don't know what's happened with me. I must be just lucky. Because, I mean, all my mates are bloody deaf as posts because they've been around motorbikes for God knows how long. And I tease them quite often. I quite often just go, what?
Keith. Oh my goodness.
Well, they take the piss out of my hairline, so why can't I take the piss out of their ear rolls?
Going back to the kind of moment it was all sinking in for Jorge Martín, something that I picked up was he was obviously in the moment, and I don't think everything had quite sunk into him up until the point he'd got into Parc Ferme, and then he'd been in Parc Ferme for quite a while they were waiting for the interviews to kind of roll through. And then you just saw that penny drop, and all the emotion came out. I think he might have been with his grandmother, his mother, and his father. And that, I think, was like a real true example of like when they're having to go through these motions of going and riding around, doing this like world championship title celebration, doing all the things that they have to kind of almost like robotically tick off. It was actually really nice to see that organic moment where it just completely sunk in.
He did a great interview with Natalie Quirk, didn't he, on TNT, where he said that he said he went from crying to smiling and back again several times, or words to that effect. I can't remember the exact, but I remember it was a good interview. And I think he's very open. He's very transparent. What's not to like about our new world champion? I mean, he's one of those guys. He's fought bloody hard to get to where he has. Last year was a disappointment. He lost out in the end. This year, it could still have gone spectacularly wrong if he had been taken out by Bastianini in the sprint race, and Bagnaia had scored the 12 points and he'd scored none. It would have meant the pressure was all on for the final race still. And there's no doubt about it. Bagnaia, pole man, he did everything he'd got to do, won both the races. So the pressure was on. I can't explain it because I'm not eloquent enough to explain how that feels, how that must feel. I mean, even from a minor championship point of view, when you get to the end of a season and you've basically got the job done, but it's still not quite done, it can still go wrong if you make a stupid mistake. And what you said a minute ago, Amy, about him drifting in and out of thinking of other things, you do it. It's to keep that focus. And of course, you only have to let your pace drop by half a second a lap and the tyre temperature change just a little bit. And you get to turn 5, particularly at Catalunya, and away it goes. I mean, Bagnaia chucked it away there. Was it earlier this year, I think, at turn 5? When he got the race won, he threw it away. I mean, this year has been about mistakes. Bagnaia has made too many mistakes. Now, that came from perhaps the tyre change when Michelin brought in that new rear tyre and it had a little bit more grip, which changes the emphasis front to back in the way that you get the bike set up. And I mean, they've obviously got a handle on it now, but it was causing problems for Bagnaia's setup for some time. And he didn't quite get it together, and that's what's cost him, really. He couldn't get the balance of the bike where he wanted to. And we've talked about many times about how he would spend Friday looking like he hadn't got a handle on the place. Saturday it would be a little bit better, and Sunday he'd be the Sunday man, wouldn't he, all the time? Well, 11 wins on a Sunday, and he still didn't take the championship.
Renita, Pecco, I think gracious in defeat, but I don't think we would have expected anything else.
No, exactly.
His interview was really good, I thought.
Yeah, 100%. And even just watching him stand by the side of the podium stage and watching Jorge do his celebration and his interview. We get the world feed here in Australia. And when I was listening to him with, I think, Simon Crafar, and he just said, this is not about me. This is about Jorge right now. It was really nice. And you can tell that both Pecco and Jorge, they're genuine people. It's not a big show. And as much as we love that big show and we love to see the characters like we've had in the past and hopefully we'll have again in the future, I think for those two, it was just so, they were in the moment and they were so happy for each other. Obviously bittersweet that Pecco didn't get that victory. But to see him standing there and he was like, bravo, you did well this year. It was just so nice. Oh, honestly, even talking about it, I get the goosebumps because it was cinematic.
I think it's worth Sorry, Keith.
Go on, Amy. You go for it.
I said I think it's worth mentioning that we will be joined by Simon Crafar later this week for our MotoGP test review. So do keep your ears pricked for that one. It'll be interesting to get Simon's word from the ground and obviously just the thoughts on him going into his new role.
Yeah, he's taken a bit of arrangement. He's such a busy man at the moment. I mean, he obviously Dogs for Life, or I think that's what it's called, his charity that he's working on as well. He's when he's away going racing, he's got a bit of a side view on the charity that he works. He's a lovely fella, Simon. So we'll talk with him. I think I've got him jacked up for Wednesday night. Thursday morning now for the conversation. So that'll be interesting. Getting back to the podium.
I just want to say, just to correct you, Keith, Riders for Dogs. Riders for Dogs. Riders for Dogs, that's all.
Not Dogs for Life. I was obviously thinking of...
Dogs for Life, though. We love them.
When you said Dogs for Life, in my head, I was trying to work out like the meaning behind it.
Nicey was where I was going to go. Hopefully we're not going to have any nicey next year because we're going to have Pecco. His brain's going to be interfered with a certain Marc Marquez. Even though, do you know what, Marc Marquez, for me at the moment, he's playing the game that we all do about keeping your friends close and your enemies even closer. Because he's being really, really cool with Pecco at the moment. But I can't see that lasting longer than a couple of races next year.
No, he's already set his intentions. It actually made me laugh because, we were chatting about whether he cared too much about finishing third in the championship between him and Enea. I think in a nutshell, he answered it in the press conference because apparently he said something like, do you remember who finished third in the championship 2 years ago? And it was like, no one cares about who finishes third in the championship. So that really underlines his intentions for next year. It's like World Championship or nothing. He doesn't care. Can I circle back to Pecco? The one thing I want to put kind of on the table as well is that he's still very much a world champion because when he really had to, those last 3 races of his were brilliant. Really, really good. They were really strong.
Yeah, 100%. I think arguably this weekend was probably one of his many best that he's had this weekend. I'm thinking back to Mugello just as an example because, he was on pole and then he took the victory from pole on Saturday and Sunday, strong in all the practice sessions and just throughout the weekend. And like Keith mentioned earlier, there's a little while there where we'd see him struggle on a Friday, struggle on a Saturday, something was switched Saturday night, and then he'd come out. But it just felt like this weekend, you could say, out of the whole season, was one of those better ones for Pecco, right? Do you think, Keith?
Yeah, I do. I think that Bagnaia, I think more for Jorge Martin that he'd beaten a guy to the World Championship that had fantastic form. He was on perfect form all the way through. He won 11 Grand Prix and 7 sprints in the course of the year. And to actually, still be beaten by Jorge Martin, that is a big up for Jorge Martin. To beat someone who is as good as Pecco Bagnaia, technically.
So the World Championship is wrapped up for 2024. And Keith, I think you started off by saying it wasn't exactly the most thrilling of season finale. But that's one thing, and I'm sure we'll talk about this in the season review that we do. Hopefully we'll have Pete McLaren along as well. But I would say as a season, whilst the Jeopardy's been pretty good, the races themselves haven't been box office.
No, and I think that's a fact. I think that it's something that we can all try and talk it up, but you can't fool the fans. At the end of the day, they know what they like. And when people are making comparisons with British Superbikes, for instance, we get spoiled every single weekend in a British Superbike race because they are just top dollar races. The only thing is, of course, and with the greatest respect to everybody in British Superbikes, it ain't Grand Prix. Your premier class bikes, prototype bikes, with all your top paid, top class men in it, is the one we want to watch, but the one we want to have performances from. So maybe it'll be 27 by the time we get to the lesser of aero, the lesser of launch control and so on. Maybe these new rules will bring it back to racing. But I think for me, when you've got a whole grid that's split by a second in qualifying, you've got a situation where everybody is so incredibly close in time. When you get to a race, there isn't the option for, let's talk about the good old days. It's the favourite saying, isn't it? You could pinch 3, 4, 5 yards into a corner if you just waited till the guy, the old adage was you waited till the bloke braked and you brake, after he braked. Well, if you do that now, you're in the field at the end of the straight because everybody is absolutely on the limit. There isn't that option anymore. It's everybody is within, thousandths of a second between them. To make it work. And I don't think there are the opportunities anymore to make the passes. Even if we didn't have any aero, we might be in a situation where it's the same thing. I think the quality is so high now and everybody is so close on time. Even the different manufacturers are achieving lap times with completely different configurations and setup. It's remarkable, really. I mean, MotoGP is a victim of its own success. For me, the rules, the outcome is unfortunately detrimental because it is so tight. And everybody, I never expected a line astern race like we pretty much had at Catalunya. I expected it to be a little bit more cut and thrust. Valencia, we get stuck with that because it's a bit of a kart track and, there aren't the opportunities perhaps. It was quite funny, you talking a bit earlier on about what Jorge Martín was thinking about Renita and the fact all of that was being done at over 200 mile an hour. It's kind of like, the speed at which these blokes are thinking, the concentration level is so incredibly high at speeds that is almost incomprehensible to normal people. I mean, 200 mile an hour, anybody, when you're traveling on 70 miles an hour in your car down a motorway, you sort of look out the window and it's all flashing past fairly quickly. Well, double that plus, and that's the normal speed of a MotoGP bike, where you're being buffeted by the wind all around you and trying to hit that last few millimeters of braking point. These guys are superheroes, really. They're achieving things that are a little bit alien to 99.99% of the populace.
Keith, do you think, or Amy, and you both can answer this, is the broadcast focusing too much on the front runners, Pecco and Jorge, and less down the back? Because I've heard on other interviews on other publications where they're saying, even the Honda riders will say, we're having a good weekend and we're battling with the Yamahas or we're battling with KTMs, but you don't hear about it because all we see is the front two people at the front. So maybe we are having the action and the racing is exciting, but it's just not Jorge, Pecco, Mark and Aya, right? Amy, Keith?
I'm nodding because I think that's a fair comment. I think sometimes unless you are there on site and you are actively tracking other people's races, whether that be through live timing and things like that, you have a better idea of their progression, and if something's happened, it then prompts you to ask, like, oh, you were doing really, really good, and then you drop back, like, did something happen? Did you have an issue? And that's when you kind of find out about those stories a little bit more. I think, in fairness, maybe the direction of the TV is at the front of the race, but when it isn't you're going to miss a pass in the next few corners, I think it does warrant flashing back to some of those battles behind. I mean, it did momentarily. There was a bit of melee, wasn't there? Sorry, Keith, you go for it.
No, you just hit the nail on the head. I think in the last couple of Grand Prix, direction has been better, and they've used more of the split screen as well. The problem you got, of course, is you don't want to miss the goal, do you? You're very well looking at what's going on in midfield, but if somebody gets it in the goal and you've missed it, if somebody falls down or whatever it is. I think you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, pretty much with the coverage. But you're right. I mean, the Marc Marquez coming through the field the other week, it was something that they kind of covered. But I think they need to use more split screen. But then you'll get people complain, well, why you don't want that split screen? We want to see what's going on the full screen. That's why we've got such widescreen TVs in our house. It's a very, very difficult thing to make work from a televisual point of view. And I mean, I often we've all worked in television, and we know what the pressures are in that truck. When you got one guy sitting there directing which camera you're going to go to next, and his head must be fried in, certain circumstances. So you've got, I think Dorna do a pretty good job, and they don't miss much. And when somebody crashes, and I'm sorry to bring up the crash side of things, but you get it from the first of all, the angle that we were all watching it on, and then all of a sudden you get it from 2 or 3 other angles that they're also covering it with other cameras. It's amazing how much they do get. So therefore, it's not through lack of cameras that we're not seeing midfield stuff. It's through, as you say, Amy, the direction. Maybe we need to see more of that. And bloody hell, I'd rather see that than shots of bloody people in pit lane. That just annoys the hell out of me. Let's go back to the garage and watch people pulling faces. No, stick them in a split box somewhere out the way, a little one somewhere in the corner. Yeah, okay, if they want to do that in a reaction to mum and dad or bloody Gigi brushing his whiskers like something out of a horror movie, that's fine. But it's kind of, pointless. I don't want to see anybody in pit box. It drives me mad. Why waste a second on that stuff when we've got action out on the track? Doesn't make sense to me. But then again, someone somewhere thinks that's important.
So then I've got a bit of a frog in my throat happening. Pick out some of the other stories from the weekend. Something that caught my attention, more so for next year, is the fact that Brad only just picked Pedro Acosta to 5th in the World Championship. That, to me, is a storyline that I think will get a few more legs next year when it's not Pedro's rookie year.
Well, he only just beat him because Marc Marquez wiped his nose and took his fairing off. Acosta's fairing. Otherwise Acosta would have been ahead of Binder and been the first KTM. I mean, sorry to be slightly cynical, but Marc was a bit harsh in hogging all the room, and Acosta lost the front end of his bike. It must have been a fair bloody hit to take the front end off the bike without knocking the bloke off. So anyway, that's my thoughts on that. I mean, it was good. Brad Binder's a great mobile rider. I expected more from him this year as well. Acosta has been a sensation. He's had that lull in the middle of the year. He's had a bit of poor luck here and there as well. I mean, Acosta is the real deal, and he's going to be back with a bang next year, of course. It's funny. I wrote down all the changes that we've got a fair old few changes next year in bikes and riders and people dropping out and people coming in. You got a couple of Moto2 guys that are coming up, of course. We're going to make it interesting as well. Next year is going to be, isn't it, this time of the year where everybody goes, I wonder if we can have what kind of year we're going to have next year. And every year you go, I think it's going to be good. You can't see it sort of diminishing in its interest. The only thing that is a problem is that the racing is not quite as good as it used to be. Or is that just me?
No, I think you're spot on. I always wonder whether it was because I wasn't at the track why I found the last couple of years not quite as entertaining, but I don't think it's just that.
Well, you got to remember that the biggest audience are the ones watching on TV. So if we ain't happy, then they ain't happy. And I think that makes a difference. I mean, there's privileged trackside viewers. I'm talking about in the paddock here, not the guys that are paying to come in. And guys that are paying to come in, they'll only pay to come in if they're getting a proper show. It's quite expensive to go to a Grand Prix by the time you've taken everything into account, especially if you're flying here, there, and everywhere. You can't dismiss the trackside audience. I mean, this is something that Silverstone is obviously watching all of the time. We've talked about Silverstone many, many times. 45,000 people as opposed to, there was 62,000, I think, here in a hurriedly rescheduled and changed venue, and they still get 62,000 people in there on a Sunday. So, there are questions to ask regarding attendance, and of course, attendance is directly, related to local riders. That's our problem in the UK to a great extent. We don't have anybody in MotoGP that are doing the business, and of course, the cost.
Renita, were there any other standout rides for you this weekend?
I think the thing that caught my attention that maybe isn't exciting, but I was really intrigued, was how much Alicia Spargo was really trying to help Jorge Martin in the sessions. And I read in a post-race press conference or debrief where Anea Bastianini kind of pointed it out, being like, why are you helping Jorge? You're not even on the same team. You're just friends. And then I think Aleix says something like, yeah, but you're on a GP24 and I beat you in the championship, or you're nowhere in the championship. So I think that really caught my attention, because I expected this weekend for Aleix to be stronger than what he was, considering how he was earlier in this year. But with the whole Ducati not stepping in and Pecco being like, no, I don't need anyone. But then he was like asking for help, and all these mind games going backwards and forwards. When I saw that on track, I think it might have been in qualifying even, where you literally saw Aleix sit up, Jorge sit up, and then he got in behind. I thought, okay, now I know where the alliance really lies, right? So what did you guys think of that? Because on socials, it has been just blowing up. There's been two sides. Some are like, yeah, that's awesome, I love it. And other people are like, why is that even happening?
There used to be a very old school kind of written thing where you don't interfere with championships. You leave the championship guys to get on with it. You don't interfere with it. And Aleix, I'm not a great fan of Aleix. Purely and simply, he wears his heart on his sleeve, and sometimes he's blubbing over stuff, and his comments now and again are, kind of contrary to what I think is important. But and he's loyal obviously to his mate, but he's not been loyal to Aprilia. He's jumped ship and he's gone to HRC as a test rider next year. Rah rah rah. So clearly, loyalty is not really as high on the list as it appears to be. I don't think he should have interfered, but then again, he's racing for himself. Perhaps it's a track that he can go well at. Did it make a difference in the end? No, it really didn't. So it doesn't really matter that much. It's just annoying, isn't it? It's kind of one of them ones that it's like a annoying flea flying around. You just wish you hadn't got it, but there it was. We had to put up with it. Aleix had his reasons. He's mates with Jorge Martin, so he rode shotgun for him for a few laps and kept everybody off of him, which, if that's what he chose to do, then that's what he chose to do. But he's out of it now. He's HRC test rider next year, so good luck with that. I hope he's got plenty of padding.
Oh, stop.
Oh, I feel sorry for Joan Mir.
Me too.
The reward this year, it should be to Joan Mir. There is no man that has put more effort into anything this year than Joan Mir.
Why is he staying? I don't get it. Like, go and earn yourself a piece of sanity and just cut loose.
I mean, how he
It's got to be so demoralising.
Square peg in a round hole as much as he has. I mean, I've never known anything quite like it. I mean, it's just a question of which corner and which lap he's going to throw it up the road on. You just hear
that tune, don't you? Na 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 na. Joanne, give it up, give it up. I was like, where are you going with this? No, I'm wincing already at the thought of him taking that on again next year. Poor Joanne.
I mean, he's signed for a fair old time as well, hasn't he? I think he's done the long deal. Joan Mir, hang on a minute, let me just check it. Now he's got end of 26 with Repsol, so he's the end of 26. Interestingly, as well, contract-wise, there's 5 riders that are going to be up for contract at the end of 25. So there's going to be a bit of movement in the old rider market at the end of next year as well. Mind you, we'll talk about that as we get to our season review later, perhaps not this one, but again, there's going to be some opportunities. But Luca Marini actually, he's up at the end of next year as well for Honda. So the two teammates, and we've got no more Repsol either. That's the last time we've seen Repsol on the side of bikes. That's going to seem really odd not seeing Repsol bikes out on a Grand Prix track next year.
Talking along the same line then, have you guys seen the new look MotoGP?
You mean
it got leaked on socials?
We had the big launch.
It got
on
leaked.
Sunday.
Mm-hmm. It got leaked on socials.
No, they invited us to leak it. That was the thing. I got it on my computer that came up and said, use it as you like. from the press office on Sunday.
Check when it was sent out now. But what do you guys think of it? I personally think it's quite cool, and I'm normally the one that's very resistant to change. The only thing I don't like, I like the font. I like the whole, like, I'm so glad they didn't try and use an in-house voiceover person for like the promo video. They've actually hired someone that is a professional, so it sounds decent. The wording, I think, is pretty okay. The only thing that I'm not like completely 100% with is like the new MotoGP logo. It just says MGP. And that's the only thing I think, or only reservation I have, is I don't think it looks very prestigious, is what I'd say. But I don't know whether that's because I've got like an MXGP background and it's for some reason slightly reminds me of MXGP. But other than that, I'm actually quite a fan. I think it's quite decent.
Reminds me of the Manx Grand Prix. What is the Manx Grand Prix? Anybody might say. MGP always had that designation, I always thought. I like the way that, like the music, the intro tune and the like that they did. I remember thinking, do I like that? I don't like it when it first came out. But I whistle it every time now when it comes out. It's a bit like the Italian national anthem. You can't not whistle the Italian national anthem. Probably hear it too much, but there you go. So yeah, kind of. There's a lot of effort goes into it. I think Dorna, they're lining themselves up, aren't they? Then they're moving ahead all of the time. And you're right, Amy. Most of us that have been entrenched in this game for as long as we have, it's a bit difficult to move on to the next thing. But then you find yourself just a week or two in thinking, shit, that looks really, really good. That looks really cool. There's a lot of effort gone into that. A lot of production quality. And you're right, voiceover. Is that Amelia Clark? Is it the famous actress that's
Oh, I don't know.
No, she's I'm fairly sure.
Is it Amelia Clark?
Yeah, I think it's Amelia Clark's voice.
She's like a Hollywood actress then.
Absolutely. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Please give me the slating that I deserve in the comments department. But I'm fairly sure somewhere I read that it's Amelia Clark, and I'm a big fan of hers. So
same.
Well, there you go.
I actually really like it, and I like it for the fact that it's the MGP is almost going to be iconic, like the F1. I think maybe they could have played with color a little bit more instead of just being black and white or white and black.
Fair.
Yeah.
But I think you even see like I'm talking from a socials point, like their little thumbnail, like their little logo, like their icon, their display
Go back
photo.
and look at it.
And you can just see the MGP, and I think it's going to start to become more predominant, where before it's like you'd only notice it because of the red checkered flag-esque thing that they had going on in the top corner. So from that point of view, I get it, but man, talking about slating, they were getting slating on social media. People were like, I could draw this in Canva.
Oh, stop.
My kid draws better than this. So
Do you know what? Go for it. Sorry, I interrupted there.
No, you're fine. I was just going to say, I think it's going to take a while, like he said, for people to accept it or go, this is the new thing. But then you mentioned the song, Keith, and I wanted to say I'm just not a fan of when they turn the song into music similar to the country they're in, like what they did in Thailand.
I love the Thai one. I love the Thai one.
Like, I don't even want to do it. I don't want to say anything, but I was just like, really?
And you know what? I like that. So that just goes to show you, doesn't it, that you can have these different opinions. And I mean, the fact is as well is that old school, as I keep on banging the old school drum here, it's across so many platforms. You've got to make this stuff so it fits across all the platforms it's going out on, and not just now, but future. There's all sorts of stuff that's going on in the background, and there'll be more when Liberty finally get this deal past the regulators to be able to make the announcement that it's a done deal. We keep talking about Liberty International taking over as they have done F1, but it ain't done yet. It's still not I'm sure it will be, but it's still got to pass the usual authorities to make that a done deal. And I wonder how much that's holding stuff up. I wonder if there's a log jam of new stuff that's being built behind the scenes for the 25 season. Hope there is.
Did you guys hear the rumor? Sorry to jump in, but you just talking about Liberty then. Did you hear the rumor that the CEO of F1 is going to replace Espeleta at Dorna? Have you heard that?
Yeah, no, I mean, like I saw that there was one or two, people have alluded to those things. Carmelo did an interview with Susie Perry on TNT. he's an old bloke now. He's a very clever fella. And Carlos, his son, is brilliant. I'm a big Carlos Ezpeleta fan. And he's young and he's dynamic and he's quick on his feet and he's got a great sense of humor and, he's been brought up well. And his sister. But the fact is that at some stage, Carmelo Ezpeleta has got to roll over. He's at an age now. I mean, the guy has been a key man in not just MotoGP, but before then, I mean, in circuits and stuff like that. He's been around for a long time, Carmelo Ezpeleta. And Liberty are going to want to replace him eventually. He has got to move on. And Liberty have picked up most of the shares as well. I think, there's only a minority shareholding that other people may hang on to, and that will only be because they'll want some kind of investment into the future, perhaps. So I think Carmelo will willingly retire at some stage.
Yeah, I think you're right. Just one more thing to pick up on, back on the whole new look stuff. I really, really hope, I've just had another look at it. I really hope people don't start referring to MotoGP as MGP.
So do I.
Like, that's my only hesitation now looking at it. Also, the other thing, because there's one little pet peeve I have, is you can really tell when someone's not completely familiar with sport, because one, F1 people call it Moto. They never call it MotoGP. They always call it Moto, and it really gets on my goat. I always correct them. And then the other thing is I've noticed is if someone's like stepping and they haven't like quite, they call it the MotoGP.
Well, I'll tell you what, the only positive that comes out of this is I've got a number plate that says Brit MGP.
So Keith, get that on eBay, Keith. Keith's going to be already having a look and see how much he can get for it.
Wait, did you say it said Brit MGP?
Well, it's BR17 actually, which it looks like Brit when it's together, and MGP. So Brit MotoGP.
You need to be driving like a really cool convertible car when we have Jake Dixon or whoever the next British rider is in MotoGP. You need to drive them in.
Do you know what?
Rolls Royce.
It's funny enough. When I got it, I thought, I can't believe I can get it. It didn't cost me much money. It was one of those ones, the DVLA here in the UK. For anybody that's outside of the UK, they won't understand this. Number plates in this country are ridiculous. Everybody wants a personalised plate of some kind or another, and you can buy them off the Driver Vehicle Licensing Authority, DVLA. They have a website, and I went on there one day and I thought, Brit MGP, I've got to have that. But it's got to be on a cool car. And I remember thinking to myself, if somebody wins the British Grand Prix and it's a Brit, I'll just give it to them. If we got a Brit. Don't ring me up, Jake Dixon. Not Moto2. We're talking Moto Grand Prix, MotoGP.
No pressure, Jake, but there's a number plate on the line here. Don't worry about your bonuses. There's a number plate.
You win a British MotoGP and you can have it.
Oh, okay. Let's pick it up on Moto2 now, as you've mentioned, Jake Dixon. Real shame that his season ended in that way.
I'd said it earlier. Turns 1 and 2, and that was the big issue for Jorge Martín. You got to get through turns 1 and 2 on that opening lap, and Jake didn't. He got mired, he got clouted, he got moved offline, way back down in the field. And as soon as you're back down in the field, any crap can happen, and it did. I mean, I felt so sorry for Jake. I mean, it was one of those situations where you get tangled. If you're out of sequence, if you're back in the pack, the amount of times we've seen very, very good riders get caught up in a position in qualifying that they shouldn't really be in, so therefore they're tangled in that first lap melee. I thought the Moto2 race was shaping up to be really, really cool. It was a good, it was looking like a great race. But Jake, it's almost a turn off when Jake's out of it. I just want to see Jake at the front, and he's consistently, podium material now. Consistently, you expect him to be there all of the time. He was just unlucky. Sorry, Jake.
I want to shout out Senna Agius, the Aussie in Moto2, because he had a very good qualifying for him. And the start of that race, he was up, I think, somewhere P6, P8, P10, somewhere there. Just a shame that he chewed through his tires and obviously dropped back. But same thing.
He's the real deal, isn't he? He's the real deal. He's looking really
talented.
Good.
Yeah, I think next year's going to be exciting because he's first year of a world championship. And I guess for us, I've never done a full season. You both have traveling, but imagine traveling as a rider and you're just off the back of racing overseas, back-to-back weekends, you go back to Europe. It's your first full year in the championship, learning tracks. I remember one time he texted me, he's like, yeah, I'm watching last year's race to learn where to brake. It's like you forget that they have to do all this stuff to prep, right? I think next year we're going to see Senna, talk about Senna 2.0, because he's with that same team. He's ticked all the boxes for this year. Next year's going to be exciting. But yeah, shame that he had to end that race so far back. I think he was on track to be at least a top 8 somewhere there.
I think for Aaron Canet, that is the perfect way to end that season, because there's always a little bit of hesitation in regards to Aaron Canet. He has obviously proved this year he can win, but more often than not, he does take the second place seat. So for him to finish off 2024 on top, a real good kind of like mental, what's the right word there?
It's like
Well,
confidence
boost.
the next year.
Boost. He's got
Boost,
that.
Yeah, mental boost.
He goes into the
confidence
winter.
boost.
He goes into
Yeah.
the winter with his whole season justified, which is
Exactly.
which is a good way to go. The only trouble is, it's quite a long time before we come out again the next year, and you have the fear then when you're a rider, particularly when you're an inconsistent rider like he is. In the back of his mind will be, can I ride a motorbike again? Because you start, as soon as you go testing for the start of the season, you get on the bike and they always feel like shit. They always feel terrible. You get on a bike that you finished last year with, if you're on the same team or whatever it might be, and they just feel terrible. They don't turn, they don't stop, they don't, everything feels like, oh God, I can't ride the bike's crap. And then it all comes. If you're think about race motorbikes, or probably any kind of racing vehicle, when you're a little bit off the pace, they feel terrible. They don't work. They only work when you are right on the pace. Tires only work when you're right on the pace. Suspension only works when you're right on the pace. So the second you are a second off the pace at the start of a season, when you get to a track for the first time, it's cold or whatever it is, and the weather conditions are, the track's slippery. You can't get near the pace, and the panic in your heart, you have to slow yourself down. Hang on a second. Just calm yourself. Just pick up the pace steadily, and don't, stick it in the hedge through trying to.
But aren't those days where like everything feels like that perfect feeling, like we were talking about, Pecco always chases? Aren't those days where the bike feels easy to ride and it's all coming to you, so far and few between? Isn't it more often than not that you are riding and everything just feels a little bit like, feel like somebody talks about it quite often. Might be Neil actually.
I think what happens is that every time you get on a motorbike, even though it's the same bike, could be the same track, the variables, the tiny little nuances that are different, temperature, setup, whatever track surface, whatever it might be, just make it. We're talking thousands of a second, and they're looking at that now. They're not looking at tenths of a second as they were. Then it moved to hundredths of a second. We're now all on thousandths of a second. The amount of times we see exact lap times, exactly the same. I think we've had 3 riders that have been on 0.000 or whatever it might be. It's remarkable, really. I think that getting an absolute perfect lap, when you've done an absolute perfect lap, you have. It's a very strange feeling when you have. Again, speaking from a little bit of experience, when you've broken the lap record, you've done it, because you know that no one could go any better than you just did. You kind of can feel the whole thing. Everything is on the move where it should be on the move. Everything is you've got the grip where you want the grip, and you're on the throttle just that. It used to be the case of you'd be coming out of a corner, you wouldn't be looking where you're going. You're just hoping to be 200 revs more as you exited the corner in exactly the same place than you were the lap before. You were just looking for those, you were just tapping it in just that fraction earlier for the whole thing to be moving. But it's all very well moving, but you want it to be pushing you forward and gripping at the same time. We all have a bit of sideways action, but that ain't driving it forward and making for a fast lap time. So there are things that we can't see as watching in from the TV just yet, although television is getting better and better year on year. But those guys are feeling it. It's like they know when they've got perfect laps. And they are. You're right, Amy. For a rider perspective, they are few and far between to get a perfect lap.
Did you?
To round off- sorry.
Sorry.
Because we're both hosts, so both used to like just jumping in. I'm going to blame that. Carry on.
I just wanted to say, how cool did the empty helmet spikes look in Moto 2 with the gold on them? Obviously for ICE celebrating winning the championship. I really liked it. I know it was a one-off thing, but I was like, that's pretty cool. I'd like to see more design like that on the bikes in the future. But you guys aren't looking like you're agreeing with me here.
Do you know what?
I'm trying to remember them.
It's a funny thing, isn't it? The old paint job makes it. Yeah, I'm again Castrol Honda. I love seeing Castrol Honda, and a big up to Zarco as well this weekend. If we're talking Zarco, top of the bloody timesheets at one point during the course of the weekend on a Honda. So Jean Zarco woke himself up this weekend as well, the Frenchman.
Right in time. Final race. Okay, before we move on to Moto 3, just another quick shout out to was it Moreira's first Moto 2 podium? Have I remembered that right?
He did win Rookie of the Year, I can tell you that, but I'm not sure about the podium.
Yeah. No,
I've got a
you just chucked your two mates under the bus there, Amy.
Have I?
Yeah, because I didn't.
Sorry. I thought, no, it might be that I just plucked it out of thin air. It just when I don't remember him being on the box before, but we'll move on swiftly then to Moto 3. David Alonso, the Wonder Kid, rounds off a near absolutely perfect season. 14th win of the year. He is the most successful rider in the lightweight class. We ran out of words to describe just how amazing this guy is.
Well, we all know the Colombian national anthem now, word to word, don't we? I mean, it's heard it a lot often. Seven wins in the last 7 races. I mean, the guy is just cut above. Be interesting to see where that goes from there. When you've had a season like this, when you come to the next year, it'll be interesting to see just whether he can carry that forward. Certainly, he's massively. He's worked so well with his team. And I think in Moto 3, sometimes we overlook how much that team makes a difference. The work behind the scenes, even in Moto 3, it might be the lower end of the categories, if you like. But again, when you've got motorbikes that are virtually impossible to find an advantage over everyone else, sometimes those guys, you remember the Leopard bikes from the past, they always seem to make those Hondas just that little tiny bit better than everyone else. They could just get it, even to the point where everybody thought they were cheating, but they weren't because, they were getting checked. But the point is that synergy that Alonso has with his team, with his crew chief and the like, has worked so well. And they'll all be hoping to be able to carry that forward for him next year.
Now, I want to tell you guys, I heard this crazy stat about David Alonso, which I thought was just fascinating. So, that of all the riders in all the classes, David Alonso is top 5 in all-time wins in the current paddock. That's across Moto3, 2, and MotoGP. So that's the same as Marc Marquez, Pecco Bagnaia, Maverick Vinales, and Jorge Martín are the only riders who are ahead of him. Considering he is only in Moto 3 now, he is moving up, but it's exciting to see where he's progressing. So #baby goat. Hey, Amy.
I'm still not a huge fan of it. I think it's definitely justified, but I'm still not a huge fan of the old baby goat hashtag.
No tattoo then.
No. The other thing I want to point out is Danny Holgado obviously securing 2nd place in the World Championship. And you've got to feel it actually for the rest of the Moto3 field, because it's in a year when it's been really hard to stand out, because you have got the likes of David Alonso, who has just absolutely cleaned up. It's kind of hard to judge the rest of the field on how good they are.
Yeah, I mean, we get that occasionally, don't we? When somebody shines quite as brightly as your championship leader did. I mean, Colin Vare had his moments as well. There are 1 or 2 others that were sort of in or. I mean, consistency is key to win a world title. There's no doubt in that. But to win it with 14 wins over a 20-round series is just remarkable. And you're right. I mean, there's no one else that's really got a look in over the year. But Moto3 still gives us some of the best racing in a weekend. And
Absolutely.
That'll continue next year. There's no doubt in that. It'll be interesting to see as we move forward again how much Liberty interfere with the categories. I got a real feeling there'll be some interference coming our way, as in our F1, whereas F1 is without doubt the premier class, and everything else below it, even though it's on the same card, if you like, for the weekend. I wonder if they'll do something similar with Moto2 and Moto3, because Moto2 and Moto3 to us is almost as important as MotoGP. Because it's a really good step ladder up through, but then again, so are the lower classes in F1. They're really good step ladders. That's where their future Formula One drivers come from. But I wonder if we're going to get a bigger gap from a promotional point of view, and MGP will be promoted above Moto2 and Moto3 in a greater manner. I hope not, because I think that we have a unique selling point, that we have 3 great championships under one banner. And even the Moto E race, to be honest, I hate Moto E to start with because it's electric bikes and I can't even consider one as an option at any stage. And blow me if we're not going to have the baggers next year as well. I mean, we're going to have Harley Davidson, like Harley Davidsons, I think. Haven't we got a baggers test that's going on at the moment around Catalunya? They're bringing them bloody great big old things. Before we know where we are, Jeremy McWilliams will be making a comeback in Grand Prix on a bagger. Go on, Jezza. Do it for us oldies.
It's quite funny because the Australian Superbike champion, Troy Herfoss, here in Australia, he went over and did the baggers in Moto America this year, and he won that championship. And I was just like, how do you go from riding a superbike, which is Australian Superbikes, very much a stock bike with a few accessories on it, to riding a bagger? He was like, totally different, like nothing I've ever done before, but he goes, so much fun. So it's exciting to see. But I just wanted to shout out, so many shout outs from me today, but Scott Ogden, our OMG pod guest, he's done pretty well in this last, I want to say, quarter of the year. It seemed like he had decent qualifying this weekend. Shame about the race because he did fall back to P17, but there was a while there where we were sitting around that 12th, 15th in the points, and I think that's good for Scott in the end of this year, right?
Well, he won't be thinking that. I can tell you that for nothing, because riders don't have the problem. And again, I don't know how good Michael Laverty's team is, and I don't mean that in any derogatory way, but we don't know how good Michael Laverty's team is, and how I just think there's a big question mark over both rider and team there. Why they haven't made that step? Because Ogden, at one point, at the beginning of the year, I thought this kid. I've always thought Scott Ogden is the real deal. I thought he will make a step, but it hasn't really come in the measure that I thought it would come. And I'm not close enough to be able to work out the reasons for that. Whether, I haven't spoken to Michael for some time either, so I'll have the winter conversation with MLav and find out what his thoughts on it are. But I mean, it's directly proportionate. Your team is as important as the rider. There's no doubt about it. And as we've just said about, Alonso, he's got that synergy that's making it work for him. Perhaps there isn't quite the same thing for the Ogden side of camp. I don't know, but it's a question I would ask.
Right, guys, that about rounds us up for 2024 in terms of races, as we topped with. We will be back later on this week with a testing review podcast with Simon Crafar, and the whole crew will also be back the week after for a 2024 season review. We will delve into the highs, the lows, the absolutely embarrassing, all sorts of things.
Are we wearing Christmas gear for that?
We can do, Keith. I can't wait to see you, baubles.
Well, I'm a word with yours, Sam.
Renita, you can get your tinsel out.
Brilliant. Amy's on top form.
You're so quick with it today, Amy. I love it. I don't know how. I've had so little sleep for the last 5 days. That's probably why. It's just delirium.
Shingles and
anyway. Right, guys, pleasure to have your company as always and to talk through the best sport in the world. Let's just leave it as that, because it's been incredible once again. Always enjoy chatting to you guys about what we've seen over the weekend. More to come next year. We've still got, like we said, testing to talk through. And yeah, many thanks. And thank you to you guys at home for listening. Do remember to hit the subscribe button, because whilst the MotoGP season has rounded out, we'll still be coming back with all sorts of content to keep you busy throughout those winter months. And before we know it again, we'll be back racing again. But many thanks for your company. Do remember to give us a like and also subscribe. More information on that on the links below. Renita, Keith, thanks so much.